puede, no puede.
Estoy prohibido. No, no está tan guapo.
Okay.
Gracias.
I think Utku is still on a phone call.
Very much.
We're going to go ahead and start, so that's fine. Just join us when you can. All right, so for the next 30 or so minutes, what I'd like to try to do, since blitzscaling is the overall theory that we're working with here, what we're going to do is we're going to come in and out of blitzscaling, right? So blitzscaling is the arc that goes over everything, and we're going to dive deep in different areas along the way. So this next section is to come back to the blitzscaling playbook, and this is a document that hasn't been shared with you. It hasn't been published. These are sort of like private notes from Reed and Chris that may someday make their way into another book or some kind of a playbook, but these are thoughts about the things that are changing across the stages of blitzscaling as it relates specifically to leadership and people. So the first obvious thing is that leadership and what's needed is going to change at every stage. And that the notion of just hiring the right people is way, way, way too simple. That in fact, only about 50% of the people that are in any given role are going to be able to stay in their same role and grow to the next phase. So if you're in the family phase now, you've hired a bunch of generalists. You've hired people that are scrappy, that can do anything, but as you start to grow, they're going to need to start to specialize and own a particular area. And it's not always the case that someone who's scrappy and skillful can grow into someone more process-oriented and a manager. So while the company can keep scaling, you should definitely expect that many of the people are going to struggle to, including yourselves. And so one of the important things here as founders is to not exclude yourself from the microscope. And if your interest is the company's success, you also have to be honest with yourself about your ability to scale and the role that you should play going forward. So as you're starting to scale, you really need to start asking this question about yourself or about the people on your team. Can they scale? Do you think you can scale? Do you have any doubt about your ability to scale a growing or a much larger organization? Who feels doubt about that? Yeah? You do?
Sure.
Sure.
I mean, personally speaking, I never run a larger team, larger than, let's say, 60 people.
60.
Yeah,
Okay.
in my professional career.
Yep.
So, and it was just a project manager role back then,
Yep.
so I was responsible for budget and everything, etc., etc. But if my company scales to, let's say, 500 or 1,000 people, I don't know that if I can change or not. That's an experiment, or let's say a journey for me too as well. It's a personal journey.
Right, of course. Yeah, and of course, working in a situation like that is different because all the support functions didn't necessarily, you had them.
To lead it.
You had them, but they weren't functions that you had to create. You didn't have to create the legal and the accounting and the finance and the marketing and the human resources department and the distribution. You were being served by them.
Mm-hmm.
So who else has ever thought, wow, am I going to be able to do this? And it's a pretty natural thought, right? So at the same time that you're feeling that yourself, you're probably feeling that about people on your team. And I imagine that every one of you right now has someone on your team that is in a role that you're watching them closely, that you're depending on them a lot, and you really need them to succeed. And you're asking yourself, can they scale?
Mm-hmm.
So the methodology that Chris and Reed have laid out, it actually goes back to one of the previous books called The Alliance. And so one of the things that's now in your drive are a couple videos. One is a video of Ben Kasnoka, who is a co-author with Chris and Reed of a book called The Startup of You. So in your drive, there's a video that we suggest you watch, and it's their take on looking at yourself, your career as a startup founder. This was also a New York Times bestseller, but it's a few years ago, so we've produced a summary video of that. It really fits in the context of what we're talking about today, about you as the individual. And then the next one is a video about building tours of duty. starting to think tours of duty. So
Sorry.
it's a military term.
If you want your video to be nice, you have to back up a little bit because your
Oh,
is
thanks.
cut off.
All right, thank you. So the tour of duty concept is sort of like a military term, right? Where, you know, you have a job in the military and this year they send you there to do this job, and then the next year they move you over here. You're going wherever the need is, right? And so one of Reed's big ideas coming out of you know, the growth of LinkedIn and going through all these different stages of blitzscaling was the importance of beginning to create a mindset of thinking about tours of duty between you and everybody you talk about. And the real basis of this is an honest conversation, which is to say, you know, I'm a small company now. You know, I hope we're going to keep growing. I really like you. I value you. I want you to stay with us, but you know, I understand that you also have your own goals and your own dreams, and at some point you may decide, you know, to leave the company. And so maybe you're working on something on the side right now, you know, and I don't want you to feel embarrassed to tell me about that. I mean, because probably if I was working for you, I'd have a side project too, because we all have our own dreams. You know, so to kind of create an environment of openness where you are, as a leader, supportive of encouraging their dreams, and they're working with you on yours. And here's the key: as long as it's mutually beneficial, and as long as you can continue to find challenges that that person can meet, and they can continue to satisfy your demands. And so, you know, each new assignment is like a tour of duty. So instead of thinking about someone, are they working for me, or are they going to stay with me, or are they going to leave? Can I trust them? Are they going to leave? It's better to start thinking, of course they're going to leave at some point. And so why not just be open and honest about that, and start to frame your thinking about that in the context of, how do I create that next tour of duty for them that creates a meaningful challenge that you know, supports their professional, personal, and family goals, their compensation goals. If I can do that, great. If not, of course they're going to move on, because I would too. And when they move on, you always want them to be very thankful and loyal, because they respect you and they appreciate the openness that you treated them with. And so they're going to leave and they're going to say, you guys were the best people that they ever worked with. And they're going to tell the story about you and your company and what an amazing place it is to work. And if they say that they left, they'll be like, yeah, you know, I left on really great terms. We talked about it, and I'm welcome back anytime. You know, so that you never have an enemy, you never have a former employee, you have an alumni. And this is now, this way of thinking has made its way into, you know, big companies now, like McKinsey and General Electric have their alumni group now, because they realize that outside network is very important to their future. So in the context of, can you scale and can your team scale, the next real important question is, do you believe that you can scale? And do you believe that they can scale? And how do those two beliefs line up? So this can be expressed in another 2x2 matrix. So if you're dealing with someone who can scale and believes they can scale, confident and competent, great, no problem. If you deal with someone who can scale but has doubts about their ability to scale, they seem hesitant to step into a new role or move into a new functional area that they haven't experienced before. They're a marketing expert and you say, you know, I really need you to run operations now because I trust you and I want you to keep growing with us. And they lack the confidence. Well, maybe you need to provide some coaching or outside mentorship, or invest in some education or something to show that you believe in them, to support them to continue growing. Because sometimes it's really just a question of confidence, or maybe there's something else going on in their life right now that causes them, you know, to hesitate. You know, this job is going to be very demanding, and my wife and I, we just had a baby, or you know, there's something else going on in my life that makes me think this isn't the right time to take on this new stressful role. And then there's people who can't scale, but think they can. You know they can't, but they really want that next big job. They want that big promotion, and probably the most important thing they want is they want you to pay them a lot more money right now. But you actually know that you're not really happy with their performance, with the things you've asked them to do up until now. And so as much as they want it or think they deserve it, they're not the person that you would first choose to give that opportunity to. And so for those kind of people, you kind of need to find a new role for them. And it's probably some kind of a sideways move. And of course, you know, I'm actually dealing with a situation like that right now with someone that works for us that...
Chris?
No, not Chris. But another team member that, you know, is always wanting to do, we could do this, we could do that, and, you know, gosh, I mean, let me do this, let me do that, pay me more. It's always the same thing. But I look back over a year, and probably less than 50% of the things that I asked him to do, which were mostly just things, if you get up every day and do them, they would be done. They're not done. And yet when you talk about that, you get excuses and justifications, and so that means you're in the bottom right quarter, and it's time for a difficult conversation, which is probably, you know, listen, it's been great. Thank you for your contribution. Let us know how we can help transition you into your next set of challenges, but they won't be here. And the, you know, so that, I'm actually dealing with that situation right now.
Let me help you being fired. Yes.
Yes. And so actually this takes me back to, you know, the famous CEO some years ago of General Electric was Jack Welch. And he had a way of, you know, talking about the bottom 10%, right? And the way that he approached talent decisions was very cut and dry. And so many people would make the argument that, you know, letting someone go, firing someone, is very hard, and it's unfair, and it's not compassionate. You know, they have a family, or they're going to go through a period of difficulty, and somehow this is your responsibility. And Welch's response to that would have been, actually it's the most compassionate thing of all, is to let someone go that isn't a good fit, because they're not a good fit because they're not a good fit. They're obviously not happy, they're not where they should be, they're not achieving their potential, and the sooner they find out where that is, the happier life that they'll have. And the sooner you'll be able to find out, you know, what it takes to find someone that does what you need to get done.
And what about people who don't have any potential?
Well, listen, I mean, at the end of the day, people need to sort themselves out, right? And, you know, you can give people an opportunity, and you can work with them and support them and document along the way, but, I mean, that's the difference between business
especially in
and
the case of
employment agency.
large businesses, you have some of this, you know, corporate social responsibility.
Yes. But I think there's a difference. I think, you know, the larger you get, of course, you start dealing with human resources and policy issues, that you have to make sure that there's no, you know, gender, racial, religious bias, there's no age-related bias. You have to make sure that your decision to let someone go is fact-based, right? And so that's where the processes come in. That maybe isn't so important at the early startup stage, but you should certainly, you know, be thinking and be aware of what the labor laws and the rights of someone are if they're your employee as opposed to a contractor. So for example, the person that I'm referring to now in our organization is an employee in Latin America, where the labor laws are actually quite a bit more supportive of the employee than they are here. So here, many states are what's called right to work, which means that you have employment today, you have a right to work, but the company has no obligation to employ you. And so the company can decide for fact-based reasons tomorrow to let you go. And, you know, whatever severance they choose to offer you is up to them. Whereas in many countries, the situation is quite the contrary. The employee has many rights, and you owe them pay when you let them go, and so it gets more and more expensive every year they're with you to let them go, and you really start thinking about, you know.
In the Netherlands, it's almost impossible to fire
It's the same
anyone.
case in Turkey.
Correct. So
You
most
pay
of
indemnities and stuff.
Of course, and it really makes you think about it. So this is a situation, you know, I spent many years in Latin America, so I'm familiar with this kind of work environment. It really makes you think differently about the decision to let someone go. So one of the things in the context here that I encourage you to find out is what are the laws, and we'll bring someone in to talk about this, but it's something to be thinking about. If you actually hire someone here, what are their legal rights as your employee? For example, for a number of years I was living in Arizona. So here the state plays a different role in labor laws as well. There's some federal things like discrimination, race, gender, diversity, things like that, age, but there's also certain laws that apply at a state level. And California in the United States, I'm not a lawyer and I don't know all the details, but of all the states in the United States, California is the most liberal, the most pro-labor, the most similar to Europe in terms of the way people think and the role of government. And in Arizona, which is just one state over, it's completely the opposite, where it's you know, the business has more rights really than the employee. So there are considerations, you know, we're kind of getting off topic here into legal structure and where to do business, but you know, there's a lot of reasons why, for example, many Silicon Valley companies will put their sales force or their customer service team in another state, right? And it's not just because the real estate is cheaper and the wages are cheaper, but
it's easier to fire people.
it is in many cases also easy to fire people. And so California and Silicon Valley is actually probably the most complicated, one of the most complicated places to do business in the entire country, right? Because it's extremely expensive, the taxes are extremely high, and the workforce protections for employees are also very high. So you kind of have, you know, the closest thing to like a European situation that you would imagine in terms of a bigger role of government and a higher cost of doing things. So just put that in the back of your head, and you know, as we talk about what you're going to do here and where, that's definitely a consideration to keep in mind. So what is the role of the leader? If you're the leader, what is your role when you're scaling? And this is really, you know, how we kind of want to summarize the day. So your role is to get the right people into the organization to accomplish your scaling plan. In the context of all the things that we talked about this morning, you have resource constraints, you don't have enough people, there's uncertainty, and yet you have to find a way to get the best people into the company. One of my partners likes to say that, you know, if you're a founder and you can't get people to come work with you, it means you're not telling your story well enough. It means that you're not a compelling enough leader or founder, that there's not enough, you know, credibility to your story from whatever source that gets people inspired to say, man, I'm going with you, you know, or, and what is the source of that credibility? Well, it could be that you're just someone that is so convinced and so inspiring and you create this vision that people want to come with you, or it could be that your metrics are so strong that the story itself or the technology is so powerful and patented that people, for whatever combination of reasons, decide that they want to be on your team. So if people can't scale, you need to find somebody that can. You need to find people that can come into the organization to help you with that. If you end up letting someone go, do it in a way that leaves a great relationship, because they now become an ambassador of your brand. They're an alumni of your company. And they're going to continue to possibly play some role. I mean, some of the larger companies that I've worked in over the years, there are many people that have been there 25 or 30 years that occupy, you know, lower or lower middle level roles that are quite happy to be there. And the company can't survive without them. And so some people, maybe they were there at the very beginning, and maybe they're still there at the end, but for whatever reason, they didn't keep growing as managers, but it doesn't mean that they're not an incredibly valuable person. So the conclusion here is that you've got to start now to have some kind of a mental framework for thinking about the growth of people. Who do you need where? What are the measures of talent or performance? And how to handle the situations when you need to replace someone with someone else. It's important because you need to maintain continuity. You can't just say, well, we grew, so I'm going to fire everybody that was on the original team because they're not good enough. Somebody was saying before Adam that, you know, I've got all these people, they're helping me, but they're not as smart, as fast, as capable as I wish they were. If I could just pay them more, I'd have better people. So suddenly you have 5 times more money. That doesn't mean you can just fire everybody and replace them with better people, because now you have a continuity.
No, I appreciate you know, the team
I know.
doesn't sound like this, you know, but
I didn't say that you said that either. I'm just saying, you know, that you have to find a way to work the people in over time. So you got to have a variety of approaches on hand. A plan to bring in higher level people and know when you need them. And so this is in this next couple of weeks, as we're talking about organization and team, we want to start to understand where you see those next important hires to be. Even if they're not necessary now, where do you think they would be? What kind of roles would they be playing? What kind of person fills the role? What would that person, you know, be doing? What would they need to earn? What are the milestones or the indicators that you need to get to say, now's the time for that person? And so again, this comes back to the concept of tours of duty. So by structuring everything as a tour of duty, you can refer openly to this concept like, look, I'm hiring you now. You know, I don't know. I mean, this is my vision. This is where I hope things are going to go. And if they go well, you know, there'll continue to be opportunities for you here, as long as, you know, we're all meeting each other's expectations. But right now, what I need you to focus on is this. This is our mission. These are our metrics. This is what we're trying to achieve from here to 3 months or 6 months. So let's structure a tour of duty where you come in, and this is what you're going to help me on now. Okay? And so we're only going to talk about 6 months right now, and we're going to be just focused on this. And when we get to the end of that period of time, I give you my word that we're going to revisit this conversation. We're going to have another conversation about what the right next tour of duty is. That's a good match for the company's needs and your skills and desires for your own personal growth. So it's always very open, very transparent. The time frame is reduced down to something manageable. So now it's not like I hired you and apparently I'm responsible for you forever, and you know, you don't know what my priorities are, and I don't know really what you want, but right now you just work for me. No, let's bring that back down to something shorter, measurable, and highly transparent. And the link to the video about tours of duty is in this deck, and it's also a direct link inside of your shared document. So the reason that you want to do this is so that you're building a strategic alliance about the people that work with you. Getting away from the notion of employee, employer, to a place of we're allies. You know, we're people that are supporting one another's lives, one another's dreams and passions and professional goals, compensation goals. So in a sense, you're like, hey, you know, we're just a couple of people here. You know, maybe 2 years from now, I might be working for you, right? Because things change pretty fast, and you never know which side of the table you're going to be on. So if the company scales beyond somebody's comfort zone, you want to recognize and celebrate the successes they had, continue to keep that trust and respect them while letting them find a place that is comfortable, where they're capable of staying. Or if they move on to another company, stay in touch with them, and so there's never any hard feelings, there's never any real separation. It's just our tour of duty ended. Our time of mutual need, agreed upon mutual need and mutual benefit ended.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really valuable concept, and
Can you go back to the
yeah,
next slide?
this one.
Talent. No, the next one. You recommend reading. The Lions. Okay.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
summary up on there, and then there's also about It's a 30 to 60 minute video that we filmed that you can watch that kind of summarizes.
More specific on recruiting.
Yeah, but the book itself is probably, you know, it's worth buying or renting if you have a Kindle. I've read it a couple times. It's a fairly easy read, and it kind of just walks you through different steps and gives you examples of, you know, how to implement this concept and the importance of thinking of your ex-employees as alumni. So I think it's very practical. So, yeah, founders are special. You guys are superstars, right? And everybody loves to say they're a founder. And as you know, Kashi mentioned this morning, being a founder of a startup and going to Silicon Valley is almost like going to Hollywood. And so there's a, you know, a possibility that you can let a little bit of this go to your head. Probably you're all past that by now because you're in the scaling stage. But you know, I can tell you that a place where I spent a lot of time in recent years was Phoenix, Arizona. It's a very large city, but it has a very immature technology scene. And just saying you're a founder or CEO is like, you can tell that people are, you know, super excited and proud of it. It's like a sense of belonging, you know, like, so entrepreneurship has become like a cult almost. It's become, you know, what people of common likes and preferences and beliefs, it's a segment of society now that many people come to feel belonging.
There's so many people who destroy the image of an entrepreneur.
There are, yeah.
They're always like, on all the events, 60 or 70% of the people who say they are entrepreneurs, but they just about to find out the idea that they're going to launch.
Right. I mean, this is my observation, you know, all over the world. And I think it's understandable because, you know, people, there's a human desire to fit in, to feel like you're working on something important, that you're, you know, doing something cool. You want to feel that about yourself. And now it's easier than ever if you're not actually doing anything or you're unemployed or whatever to just say, I'm a CEO. Yeah, I got a startup, right? And start telling the story. And the next thing you know, you're up on stage and you're presenting at conferences and nobody knows the difference. And frankly, a lot of times nobody even asks you to prove one way or the other. So that gets back to the problem of integrity that we talked about this morning, right? So here, we know that founders truly are special, and I'm not in any way questioning, you guys are the most special things of all for your own companies. And you're the only people that can consistently be counted on to do what's right for the company, right? So if somebody else needs to get paid, you're gonna pay them first and not pay yourself. If somebody needs to put money into the company so that other people can get paid, it's gonna be your money. You're the one out taking the risk, right? So the founders are special because of their commitment and because of their participation in the vision, not necessarily because of some kind of cult-like personality or you know, like in the case of the founder at Uber where, you know, it was all about him. Right? You hear so many stories about how he didn't trust anyone and didn't build a team, and you know, these personality characteristics bring problems as the company grows, right? So you may have an official title, you may do a job in the company, or you may become like some of the guys that started Twitter, just founders, you know, and you don't really have a job, and nobody, but you still own stock, you're still a founder. Here you are in the building, and now maybe it's a little awkward because, you know, what do we do with this person, right? He's still a founder, she's still a founder, but not performing a job in the organization. So I've dealt with this situation a number of times in a similar situation working in family-owned companies where the company is quite large now and the children or the grandchildren are in the business and they're all very, very wealthy and they're there, but they don't really have a job and everybody knows that and it's kind of uncomfortable, you know? And so the question is, what is it other than the work that you're doing or the role that you're occupying that makes you special as a founder? And it has to come back to the commitment that you share to what's right for the company and the commitment and passion that you feel for the vision for the problem you're solving, for the change you're making, for the whatever it is that brought you here in the first place, the why that you're doing this. And so it comes with risks, it comes with opportunities and privileges, but the role of the founder, if your company succeeds, is likely to change dramatically, right? Because there could come a time when you conclude, I'm no longer the right person to run my business. Because I wanted to get bigger, and I'd rather continue to be an owner and let someone who's been proven to have the capability to grow an organization like this come in and take it to the next level. And now what? Now you're not the person sitting at the end of the table making the decisions. Can you live with that, right? Because the reality is that if you're successful, every one of these companies that scales turns into a publicly traded corporation on the New York Stock Exchange. And in almost zero cases, I mean, you have Bill Gates, you have Steve Jobs, you have the guys at Google, you have Mark Zuckerberg. There's very few cases where the guy that started it, or the girl that started it, is able to go all the way up that ladder. And so
Steve Jobs got fired on the way, right?
yeah. So think, if as long as you're grounded in, the authentic part about being a founder and not the ego-based part, the mission-based part, the meaningful part, then it doesn't matter what role you occupy and what place you enter or leave your organization, because the mission that you set out to accomplish is still being accomplished. And you know that it wouldn't have happened without you. And that has nothing to do with what job you're doing today. At the same time, you really want to avoid this cult of the founder, right? Where you build a team and everyone in the team has to defer to you. Oh my God, Ezekiel is so amazing, and
Yeah.
I know. Look, I've been telling everybody that, but
No, he was not.
no.
You didn't tell me that.
And you start to see this, this cult of personality, certainly that forms around Steve Jobs, and it forms around Mark Zuckerberg, or people like this, where they think that, wow, this person is superhuman, right? When in fact, it's just another person that had the right blend of fit and luck and timing and resources, and so many things go into determining why it was that person and not you, right? And so looking at someone as semi-divine or perpetuating that myth about yourself probably is something that's going to set you up to fail. I've also worked, I worked in a startup. It was a private equity backed company where the guy that ran the private equity fund, all everybody in the place could talk about was what a genius he was. Dave, he started his first company when he was 16, and then he sold it when he was 19, and he dropped out of college, and then he did this and he did that, and blah 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 blah. Dave, everything was about Dave, and it was really just a little unusual, and I don't know that it necessarily led to a strong team, because Dave was the kind of person that came and went, and because he had made some money, he wasn't involved in the operations of anything. He just kind of dropped in and dropped out. But when he was there, he had to be the smartest person in the room. Maybe he was. I mean, there's no question the guy was very brilliant and successful. But the feeling that left everyone else with was, none of us are as good as Dave. It's only, this is really all it's just really all about Dave. And if you really want to be a leader and build an organization, it should really be about the people. And it should be about making everyone feel like they're Dave. So that everyone goes to work and comes home and said, it was what I did today that contributed to the success of this company. And they want to go home and be proud of it and share it with their friends and tell what a great place, what great people you are to work with, because you're helping them grow, right? That's what produces a happy workplace. We were down in January, Chris and myself and Catherine, who was here this morning, and one of our other partners, we went to see a company called Gusto. It's a great human resources platform. It's now valued at about 1.1 billion. It's going to be raising a D round in in July, it's growing phenomenally. And we walked through the workplace, and there's now about 700 employees. This company's only 5 years old, and people were happy. You could see it. People were happy, they were collaborating, they were working hard. And then we met the CEO, and it was really, really clear to me after meeting him. We were all impressed. The guy's 35 years old, and it was his third startup, and all of the founders they knew each other at Stanford. They were all grad students together around the same period of time. A couple of them had worked together previously, so again, it fit the category of the team that had worked together before. But he came out of his office very humbly. He was wearing no shoes. You have to take your shoes off. He gave us each a pair of socks. So it was Gusto brand socks, and we put on the socks. And he was very relaxed and mindful and very humble. There was nothing about him that in any way was the image of the powerful CEO. He was actually, another word you could use to describe him would be soft-spoken or even almost gentle and thoughtful, right? Now, I'm not saying that these are qualities that you need to possess to be a CEO. Not at all. You don't need to possess them. I'm just saying you can be like that and also be a CEO. You don't have to be the Wolf of Wall Street. But when we went into his office, we spent about an hour and a half with it, letting him tell his story about what he was doing. The choice of his words, every word was so carefully chosen. Gusto is a community. It's a community. And we're just the stewards of the community. We're growing this community to help people. Investors are part of our community. The employees are part of our community. And so, and you could tell the guy really believed it. So it was exactly the opposite of the cult of the founder. It was someone who was clearly competent and had a great team, but was letting it be all about everybody else, and looking at himself as the facilitator of a community that is creating value together by meeting a need in the market. So for me, it was interesting to see. To me, it was a kind of an enlightened form of business leadership, because I've seen a lot more of the Fortune 500 CEO, which is definitely cut from a different kind of cloth.
It sounds like it's talking about some mystical saying.
Well, there was a quality about the guy. No, there was, but there was none of this cult of it. Precisely because it wasn't all about him is the point. So the point that Reed makes in the playbook, and it's like a direct quote, is that if you think you have to be like Steve Jobs to succeed in Silicon Valley, then mistakenly you might decide that you also have to be autocratic and not listen to other people and be so demanding that you make people cry all the time. And that would be a wrong assumption, because what allows you to succeed is having the right skills with the right team to solve the right problem at the right time. It's not about some archetypal skill set or way of managing. That may have worked for Steve Jobs, but that doesn't mean that you have to be like Steve Jobs to be as successful. So fit and luck are essential. There is no definition of a universal founder. There is no archetype that you have to be like this to succeed as a founder. And it's very obvious that Reed and Chris almost question or doubt the way Steve Jobs did things, and suggest that anybody else trying to do that, it probably wouldn't work for them. So that kind of perfectionism that Jobs has may work for a very high talented workforce that's building a high value product, like Kashi said this morning. At Apple they have the luxury of building perfection into everything because that's what people expect. But most of the time, it wouldn't work well in any other kind of business. So again, there's no archetypal type of founder, and there's